Today we are going to discuss about quadratic equations. So I want to start by defining quadratic equations. Quadratic equations are these expressions where the highest power of the unknown is 2. So in quadratic equations or expressions, the unknown, which is also the variable, has a power of 2. The highest power is 2. So anytime you have a quadratic, anytime you have an expression and you want to know if it's a quadratic expression, just check the highest power of the variable. The variable, they are the alphabets, like X, Y, and Z. So let's look at some of the expressions here. The first expression here will have x plus 4 equal to 11. If you look at this x here, the power of x is 1. I want you to remember that anytime an alphabet is just on its own with no power, it means there's an invisible power of 1. There's an invisible power of 1. So if you see x alone is the same thing as x raised to the power of 1. So that's how these things work. You see an alphabet just standing alone, just know that the power of that alphabet, that variable, is 1. So I'm saying for this first example here, this first expression here, the power of x is 1. So it's not a quadratic expression, rather it is a linear equation. Anytime the power of the variable is 1, the equation is a linear equation. Let's look at number 2 here. The second one here, you have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equal to 0. This one, we call it a quadratic equation. Why do we call it a quadratic equation? It's because the highest power of the variable, which is x, the highest power of x here is 2. So if you look at it, we have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equal to 0. So the highest power of the variable here is 2. So this equation is actually a quadratic equation. Now sometimes some equations have the power of the variable to be greater than 2. What we call such expressions, we call them polynomials. We call them polynomial expressions. If you look at this number 3 here, we have x raised to the power 4 plus 2x raised to the power 3 plus 5x raised to the power 2 plus 2x plus 2 equal to 0. The power of x, the highest power of x in this expression here is 4. So it's not a quadratic equation, it's a polynomial. So you need to know the difference between a quadratic equation, a linear equation, and a polynomial. Okay. Yeah, some authors, some writers actually call quadratic equations as polynomials here, but specifically the polynomials actually start from equations where the variable has a power from 3 and above. That's how it's supposed to be. So sometimes you can have some exercises that they can ask you to identify whether the equation is a quadratic equation or a linear equation or polynomial. Okay, so before we go to the general form of a quadratic equation, I want to write an expression here for you. I want you to identify this expression, whether it's a quadratic equation or it's a linear equation or it's a polynomial. This is the question now. 2x plus 3 equal to 5. What do you think about this expression? Is it a polynomial expression? Is it a quadratic equation or a linear equation? You can pause the video and try to solve this question on your own. Yeah. So how do we solve this problem? Let's look at the power of x. 2x here doesn't mean that the power of x is 2. This 2 here is just the coefficient of x. So x here has the power of 1. Remember, I told you before that when an alphabet is just on its own, there's an invisible power of 1 there at the top. So this is a linear equation because the highest power of x is not 2. Alright? Yes. So you can practice more questions like that on your own. So the next thing we're going to talk about now is the general form of a quadratic equation. Remember, we're not treating all of them, we're just treating one of them, which is quadratic equation. All quadratic equations conform to this general form. There's a general form of quadratic equation, and this is it. We have as squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. The general form of the quadratic equation is as squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. So we need to understand what a, b, and c stand for in a quadratic equation. The a stands for the coefficient of x squared. Remember, coefficient means a number that is attached to a variable. That is coefficient. So a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is actually the constant in the expression. A constant is that number that is standing alone. That number that is standing alone in an expression. That is the constant. Alright, so let's solve this example. Look at the expression x squared plus 3x minus 18. Can you see this expression here? Is equal to 0. Using the general form of the quadratic equation, which is as squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, find a, b, and c. So when you have this question like this, what should you do? First, you need to compare. You need to compare the question to the general form of a quadratic equation. You need to compare the question that's given to you to the general form of a quadratic equation. So let's write the general form of a quadratic equation by the side now. This is the general form of a quadratic equation: ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. This is the general form of a quadratic equation. Now let me bring the question up now. We're going to compare them. This is the expression of the quadratic equation now. We have x squared plus 3x plus, oh sorry, not plus again. The next one here is minus. The next one here is minus. So minus 18 is equal to 0. So if we match them, let me use another ink, another color of pen. If you match them from the general form downwards, look at a matches with an invisible coefficient here, which is 1. B matches with this number here, which is 3. C matches with this number, which is minus 18. So we can say that in this expression, x squared plus 3x minus 18 equal to 0, the coefficient of x squared, which is a, is 1. Okay, and the coefficient of x, which is b, is actually 3, the number attached to b. And the constant c is that number that is standing alone. And please, when you want to consider this constant, consider the sign too. So the constant is minus 18. Can you see that? Now, do you know why the coefficient of x squared is 1? There's an invisible 1 attached to every alphabet that is just standing on its own. For instance, if you just have x squared like this, it means 1 times x squared. Okay? It means 1x squared. Well, you know, we can't write that 1x squared, so we just leave it that way. Okay, so as a mathematician, you just need to know that. Alright, so we have been able to find A, B, and C. We have been able to find A, B, and C. Yeah, so before we move further, I want you to try identifying A, B, and C in this equation that I'm going to write now. This is the equation that I'm going to write now, quadratic equation. S squared plus 4x plus 4 equal to 0. I want you to identify A, B, and C. You can pause the video and then you identify A, B, and C. Alright, so in this question, A is always the coefficient of x squared. Remember, I said coefficient is that number that is attached to a variable. And I told you before that when there's nothing there, when you can't see any number, it means there's an invisible 1 there, but we don't write it. So our A is 1. Our B is the coefficient of x, a number that's attached to x. Now what is the number? That's 4. So our B is 4. And our C is the constant, which is the number that is standing all by itself, not attached to any alphabet. So our C is 4. Can you see that? So you can practice more questions on your own. Just check some questions on your own, then you identify A, B, and C. This A, B, C, they are so important because when we come to solving problems on quadratic equation, you will need to know when to use A, B, C, especially when it comes to the quadratic formula. Alright, so the next that we're going to discuss about now is the methods that you need to use to follow in solving quadratic equations. Methods that will follow in solving quadratic equations. There are basically 4 methods that we use in solving quadratic equations. The methods are 4. The first is factorization method. Okay, you just find 2 factors, okay, of x to get, or y, or any variable to get your answer. Okay, you factor out some factors. We're going to do that, so you need not panic. Over time, we're going to practice them. The next is the formula method. That's method number 2. The formula method is very important too. We're going to use that too. The next is completing the square method. That's the third method of solving quadratic equation. Completing the square method. Alright. And the last is the graphical method. The graphical method. So these are the 4 methods that we use in solving quadratic equations. Alright. So for today's class, we are going to just solve on only one of them, which is the first here on our list, factorization method. Alright, so I have some examples here. That we can solve using factorization method. This is a multiple choice question. I want us to solve and get the answer. Okay, look at the question. Question 11. Forget the number. Solve by factorizing. Look at the question that we're talking about now. That's the question we're talking about now. Solve by factoring x squared plus 3x minus 18 equal to 0. So in factorization method, I have some key things that you need to know. For you to solve problems using factorization method, you need to know some key steps. Are you with me? Alright, the first is you need to identify A, B, and C in the equation. You need to identify A, B, and C in the quadratic equation. That's the first step. So in this question here, we want to identify A, B, and C. Let me move to this side. We want to identify A, B, and C for question 1. Our A is the coefficient of x squared, and that's 1. Our B is the coefficient of x, and that's 3. Our C is the constant. Our C is the constant, and that's minus 18. Minus 18. Alright, so I said before, when you want to solve quadratic equation using factorization method, the first thing you need to do is to identify A, B, and C. Alright, so we've identified A, B, C now. The next is we need to find two factors. We need to find two factors that when you add them together, they will give you the value of B plus the sign. Please remember, they will give you the value of B, including the sign. If B is plus, and it's going to give you a positive B. If it's a negative 1, it should give you a negative B. Alright? So find two numbers that when you add them, they will give you B. And when you multiply them, they will give you a C. They will give you the C in the quadratic equation. So for this question, we are going to find two factors that when we add them, they will give us plus 3. Because our B is plus 3. And when we multiply them, they will give us minus 18. Because our C is minus 18. So, how do we find these numbers? It's not very hard. You can just use a prime factor method. Alright, you can use prime factor method. Like this C now is the one that we can multiply two numbers together. You can see C is 18 minus 18. So what are these factors of 18? Two numbers that you can multiply to give you 18. Yes, I know you can multiply 2 and 9. Okay, to give you 18. Alright. In fact, the best way to do this is just list out all the factors of 18, because 18, which is C, is one of the numbers that you need to multiply two factors by to give you 18. So let's find the factors of 18. We'll have 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18 itself. Alright, so we need to find two factors that when you add, and they will give you 3, and when you multiply them, they will give you minus 18. So you can see that since there's a negative 18 there, you can't use two positive numbers. We have one positive and one negative. So let's see now. Let's try plus 3 and plus 6. So plus 3 plus 6. We're adding them now. 3 plus 6. Will it give us 3? No. So we can't use plus and plus. Alright, so let's try plus and minus now. Okay, plus 3 minus 6. We are trying to add the two numbers that will give us our b. So if you look at plus 3 minus 6, our answer is going to be minus 3. But in our equation, our b is plus 3 and not minus 3. So we can't use plus 3 and minus 6 as our two factors. Okay, so let me change the sign now. Let's try minus 3 and plus 6. Minus 3 plus 6 is going to give us plus 3, which is our b. Okay, so let's try minus 3 times 6. Minus 3 times 6 is minus 18. So we've gotten the two factors that can fit in to give us, that we can add them to give us our b, and we can multiply them to give us our c. Are you with me? Yeah. So remember, rule number 1, identify a, b, and c. Rule number 2, find two factors that when you add them, they'll give you a b, and when you multiply them, they'll give you a c of the quadratic equation. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 3 now, you need to substitute those two numbers in terms of x into the equation. Let me write that. We have our equation s squared plus 3x minus 18 equal to 0. Yes, we've gotten two values, minus 3 and plus 6. So I'm going to write them in terms of x. That is minus 3x and then plus 6x. Okay, we're going to substitute them in terms of x. So look at this 3x here. We're going to remove it and bring these two expressions here, these two factors. Y. Remember, minus 3 plus 6 is going to give you the plus 3. So we want to remove this plus 3x now. So what we have now is s squared. Now minus 3x plus 6x minus 18 is equal to 0. Okay, so what have we done? This second expression is similar to the first one up here. But what we just did is, in terms of this plus 3x, we inserted this minus 3x plus 6. Since minus 3x plus 6 will give you what? Plus 3. Minus 3 plus 6 is plus 3. So we have been able to substitute for the value of those two factors now into the equation. The next step now is to group them into 2. You can see we have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we are going to group them into 2. So I'm going to use brackets to group them. I'm going to use brackets to group them. So the next is, let's find the common factor in this expression. We have s squared minus 3x. So what is common between s squared and minus 3x? I can see an x. So I'm bringing x out of the first bracket, then open bracket. So x times what will give us x squared? X times x. Minus x times what will give us 3x? X times 3. Can you see that? So we factored out what is common in the first bracket. The next we need to do is we come to this second bracket and factor out what is common. What is it that is common there? What is common that I can see is 6. So we are bringing 6 out. Okay, this is plus 6. We are bringing 6 out. open bracket. Now 6x divided by 6, you just have x standing alone, minus 18 divided by the 6 that we're factoring out, that's 3. So you can see that we're factored out 6 in the second bracket and x in the first bracket. I want you to know that the whole method lies on this point here, where you are factoring out the common terms. So what do we do next? If you look at this brackets that we have, two brackets are the same. The values in the two brackets are the same. We have x minus 3 in this first bracket and x minus 3 in the second bracket. So since they are the same, you pick one of them. You pick one of them, that's x minus 3. Pick one of the brackets. After you pick one of the bracket, then you pick the values outside each of the brackets and bring them together. This first bracket, the value outside is x. The second bracket, the value outside is 6 plus 6. So this is x plus 6. You put them in the second bracket. Okay, put them in another bracket. Okay, equal to 0. So the last thing we need to do now is just pick one bracket, equate it to 0. X minus 3 equal to 0, or x plus 6 is equal to 0. Okay, so I've just picked each bracket and I've equated it to 0. So we need to make x stand alone. So what we can actually do is, for this first expression here, we can decide to add 3 to both sides. So x minus 3 plus 3 is equal to 0 plus 3. We're adding x to both sides of this first equation. So x is equal to, now minus 3 plus 3 will go to the 0, and x is equal to 0 plus 3, which is 3. So for the first part, our x is equal to 3. Or here, x plus 6 is equal to 0. What do we do to make x stand alone? We subtract 6 from both sides. So we have x plus 6 minus 6 is equal to 0 minus 6. So again, plus 6 minus 6 will go away. We have x to be equal to minus 6. So the correct option here is x is equal to plus 3 and minus 6. Which option is that? Option D is the correct one. So that's where we'll stop for today's class. We're going to solve more in our next class. You can also solve more on your own. But this is basically how factorization method works. We're going to solve more examples in our next class. So this is Excel Born Academy, the place where mathematics is made easy. So you want to improve in math, you want to get to the peak in math, just you just follow my videos on YouTube. And if you need more videos, if you need a video on any topic in math, just contact me and we'll send the video to you. So subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get more from my videos. So thank you for listening and have a great day.